Hi, I'm Lucas, and this is the Quacks Podcast. I'm feeling very relaxed today. Yep, I've been working a lot.
So naturally relaxed or?
Tired relaxed.
Yeah.
Which is relaxed still.
You seem very serene, but not like agitated serene. You seem calm and at peace.
Yeah, I'm chill. I am chill. And my insurance company just called me and did an interview, and I talked to this lady and was like, "Hey, how's it going?" And she was very official, but I was chill. It was fun.
What was she why did the insurance company call you?
So they interview me maybe a few times a year, and I don't get it, but they'll be like, "Well, it says in our records here that you have diabetes." I'm like, "Yep." They're like, "Well, can we ask you some questions about it?" And then they just asked me about, the drugs I'm taking.
How do you feel about sugar?
Right? And I go and I answer their questions. They're like, "All right, well, we're gonna send you some information, and we're just getting our system ready, and we're getting you right in our system, and we're gonna send you some things you can learn." And I'm like, "All right, thanks." And then they'll call me 4 months later. "It says in our system you have diabetes." And then the whole thing will happen.
My next
again.
question would be what system is this that continually is not telling you what I've already told you?
Right? I don't know.
That's a flawed system.
I know, but I'm used to it. So I get to talk to Cindy, and Cindy, takes my info.
That's cool, and it's kind of flies in the face of all my other dealings with insurance companies that have just been delightful. If you work for an insurance company, please turn off the podcast right now.
That's right. So anything new, man?
I'm just kidding. We just isolated an entire population.
They don't matter.
They matter a little.
A little.
Okay. No, I'm doing well, man. The summer is winding down. I have a kid who's about to start her junior year of high school, and that's kind of exciting and scary at the same time. And she's learning how to drive, and we've been going through that whole process. Yeah. So, yeah, no, I mean, it's the first time that I really realized as a parent, she's going to be moving on here pretty soon. And it's kind of an unsettling feeling. I thought she'd be around hanging out with me forever, being my wingman, but she's got her own adventures to attend to, and I'm grappling with that, but it's great. I'm good. It makes me serene as well.
Yeah, I read an article, or maybe a friend of mine told me about an article that said that the time you spend with your kids, 90% of it is before they turn 18.
Really?
Really.
Oh,
I know it's
2
sad.
years.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to try. I've already told her, I got to know where the college is with plenty of, at least a year advance, so I can be there. And she's like, "Oh, great."
What do you mean, be there?
I mean, be in the same town that she's going into college. So if she needs
You're going to move?
It's not without... I've thought about it. I know that sounds crazy, but if she's not going to go to school in the city, or in the town that I'm in, I'd still like to continue. And it's an easy fix for me. I can do what I do anywhere. It's kind of a no-brainer. I just go pick someplace nice.
All right.
Yeah, so that's a possibility.
Cool, man. Right on.
Right on.
Right on. All right. So today we're going to do a podcast on a comprehensive model of heart disease. And it's new.
Okay. I like new.
Yeah. So last week we had talked about stents and some other not so useful surgeries.
Mm-hmm.
And so it got me thinking that we should cover heart disease. Despite a lot of advancements in surgery and drugs, heart disease, it's kind of still the number one killer in America.
Great.
I also think the options offered for heart disease are usually not great because the theory surrounding heart disease is actually rather poor. I'm sure there are many who would kind of take umbrage with that, but I have this basic belief that if you understand the truth of something and the problem is solvable, then the solution should be absolute, right? So to give you an example, there were all kinds of theories around tuberculosis, right? Or consumption, as it was called back in the day.
Yeah.
And they had various treatments with varying levels of success, but once the correct theory about TB and its, bacterial origin was discovered, the solution was simple. It was just antibiotics. And now TB, it's a non-issue. For all intents and purposes, that problem is solved, assuming, some antibiotic-resistant TB doesn't decimate the planet.
Right.
But it's solved. Now, I think we can get to the same phase with heart disease. We have different therapies with varying rates of success. Some people do the diet and exercise thing after a heart attack, and combined with some drugs, they never have a problem again. For other people, it's like no matter what they do, their heart is always failing. But, if we can put forward a new theory that explains the observed phenomena and gets to the root of heart disease, perhaps it could be like TB eventually. Just a problem of the past.
Being personally affected by some heart issues, I'm definitely looking forward to getting over that if it's in the near future.
Do you mind saying what your heart issues are, or do you not want to share it?
Well, it's not even. It's mechanical in nature.
Oh, really?
Extra beats. A lot of I will intermittently, and it's tapered off considerably since I've made some modifications. I actually haven't had an issue here for a little bit, but and part of that was just removing caffeine, at least hardcore amounts of caffeine. But it is associated with sleep too. But I'm electrical issues of my heart, essentially. Extra
Really?
beats going into AFib, coming out of AFib. I mean, I'm talking just very briefly, but also just pumping erratically, not necessarily with tachycardia, which does sometimes happen, but just like the frequency and consistency and strength of the pumping mechanism. So I think it's a combined thing, but the jury's still out because I haven't gone in to get additional testing.
Have they ever given you a diagnosis, or?
I've been told that I have an abnormal, like a slightly abnormal valve. I did go into AFib and was in the emergency room, and they had the paddle standing by because they're going to have to shock you back into normal sinus if you don't regulate yourself.
Yep.
But they just said electrical issues. They never talked about what was causing it. Is it environmental? Is it as a result of too many, electrical, what are protons, electrons in the heart? I don't know. They just said that was that. And then I also have a valve issue. They also said that I have a valve issue, which has been likened to almost like it's a minor form of the, what's it called when you have the blowback of the blood going back.
What is that called? Whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know.
That's so sad that that's such a basic thing that a lot of people are faced with. But yeah, so it's a combination deal. In long.
So they never looked at your arteries and were like, your arteries are clogged or anything like that.
I never got a clogged. I never. In fact, the last time I got my arteries checked, they were fine.
Okay.
So it's not about blockage.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this will help you. I mean, that's kind of an atypical, you don't really have a what's wrong, right? It's just like, oh, this is happening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which seems to be pretty prevalent with a lot of ailments.
Yeah.
But
that's true.
Let's get into it because I think that it definitely can benefit.
It might. Yeah. So this is a theory about heart disease, and I think it does give you the whole picture, and it has a testable hypothesis that you can test out yourself. The PhD who came up with it is out of MIT, and her name is Dr. Stephanie Seneff. Mm-hmm. And she's going to tell you herself that this is just a theory for now. It doesn't have proof, but there's a lot of evidence, and there's some testable conclusions you can look at. But first, I want to go over some of the theories out there that are kind of thrown around about heart disease in the health food world, especially. So the big one is inflammation, right? And I hear this one all the time, and it goes something like, well, the cholesterol building up in your arteries is actually there because of inflammation. So, we're eating too much sugar, and that is causing your arteries to get damaged, and the cholesterol is there to patch over that damage. That's what your body puts there. Now I use sugar, but sometimes it's stress or inflammation from some other source or whatever. Mm-hmm. And the explanation basically goes along with the mainstream idea of heart disease. But instead of it being caused by cholesterol, eating too much fat or, one of the other risk factors, it's caused by inflammation. So the theory is reasonable because, often those who have heart disease have inflammation. The two conditions are usually found together. And there's even a lot of studies showing that certain anti-inflammatories can lower the chance of heart attack.
Yep.
Mercola has an article that really explains this well. And I'll link to that in the show notes. It's really good. It's a good explanation. It has some great tips about magnesium, bringing down your chance of heart attack. So I'm not knocking it. There's some good stuff there. The problem with this theory is that inflammation, it's relatively easy to bring down. And if the theory is correct, then we should see a dramatic drop in heart disease when we use anti-inflammatories. Right? That would make sense. But we don't. In fact, if we use some of the strongest anti-inflammatories out there, like corticosteroids, we sometimes see an increase in heart attack risk.
Wow.
This comes from some research that is in the early 2000s. They looked at over 60,000 people who were using corticosteroids. They found that those using high doses of corticosteroids have an increased risk of heart disease. And this wasn't causal, meaning, there were other factors that could be accounting for this. But what we can at least say is that steroids didn't bring down the chance of heart attack like we might expect if it were an inflammation thing. So inflammation falls into that category where, causation kind of might get mixed up with correlation.
Okay.
Right? Meaning we see it along with heart disease, but bringing it down does not necessarily have like the hard-hitting results that we would assume would occur if we were addressing the root of the problem.
A plus B should equal C.
Right? Yeah. So the same situation arises with the cholesterol explanation. Like we mentioned a few weeks ago when we talked about statins, 50% of the people who go to the hospital for a cardiovascular event have normal cholesterol. In fact, there was a study, I think it was 2016. It was a meta-analysis. It looked at 30 different cholesterol studies. They found that LDL, the bad cholesterol, it was associated with heart disease. It was not associated with heart disease. And in fact, in almost half of the studies they looked at, lower levels of LDL were actually associated with an increased risk of dying from a cardiovascular event.
What?
I know.
That's backwards.
It's backwards. It's not supposed to do that. So again, we kind of see the same pattern as we did with TB before the advent of antibiotics. With the cholesterol theory, there's some level of success there, right? If you have a crazy genetic mutation where your body produces cholesterol in like the 800 range, bringing that down lowers your chance of heart attack. So there's reason to suspect cholesterol is tied up in all this. And it does have some success, but it's not the real hard-hitting results that we would assume would occur if the root of the problem was identified.
Okay.
So with TB, we saw basically all the sanitariums, they closed because there was simply no more people with TB left.
Yeah.
We want the same success with cardiovascular disease if we can identify the root causes.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense.
Okay, cool. You're with me.
I am 100%.
All right, cool. Well, I want to do a little rant on something. It's an aside.
Okay.
Okay.
You're like, I don't like your shoes, and I don't like them coming into my house. I was like, I thought it was going to be related to the podcast. Okay.
Like, wow, man, why are you bringing up personal stuff?
Wow, hates my shoes.
Yeah. So it's basically about getting the root cause of things. And I found this to be, for myself, like a really good life hack.
Okay.
And so what I found is when you get to the true cause of something, flow state occurs. Have you heard of flow state?
I've heard it, but I don't know what it is.
Most people have experienced flow state. It's where you're kind of in the flow, you're in the moment, things are just happening as they should happen.
Okay.
So you don't necessarily have to think of how, you're not problem solving so much.
You're just actively in it.
You're just in it. And so, whether it's creative work or problem solving or whatever, if you're dealing with the direct cause and effect of things, you just flow.
Okay.
Like your effectiveness, your ability to predict the future, it's at 100%.
Really?
Yes. If you're dealing with the true cause and effect that you have. If you run it, you don't run into walls, you don't face hardship, you don't struggle, things just pan out as they should. All right? Does it kind of make sense?
I love that place. If you can achieve it.
So like part of my experimentation journey with solving my own health issues has been about coming up with theories saying, okay, if this theory is correct, then this substance or practice should resolve the problem. And so for example, when I was having these breathing problems in May and June, one of the theories was that it was bad allergies. So I took a bunch of allergy medications, right? Both natural and pharmaceutical. Well, my allergies went away, but the breathing problems didn't. So, that theory may have played a part, but it wasn't at the root of the problem. And so my goal with the podcast and in life is to find the root of problems.
Okay.
And not just in cardiovascular disease, but also autism, ADHD, diabetes, you name it, really.
Completely.
And I believe in my soul that all of these have a root cause that can be found. Now, maybe that root cause is complex and multi-layered, but
Or decades old even.
Or decades old, yeah.
Yeah.
It's found in some old textbook,
Yeah, or just something that you've been dealing with. Are you talking about personally for decades? Then the root of it is something that was from when you were a kid.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about like Sherlock Holmes, like going way back in time or something like that.
Well, that too.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, there was a great story, and I want to talk about it next week, of a guy who was sick for 11 years and ended up curing himself eventually, but he had to invent a whole new surgery for himself and find a doctor who was willing to perform it on him, and he cured himself.
And he did it himself?
He did it himself.
A layperson?
Over 11 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, of like reading books and trying to figure stuff out. And I know it's a really
movie.
cool. It's a really cool story. So
Yeah.
we'll talk about it next time. But yeah, I want to find the root, and that's really what motivates me to do these podcasts and read all these research. Now, like I said, maybe the root cause is complex and multi-layered, but if you can map it correctly, we should see 100% efficiency in dealing with the issue.
Completely.
And I won't really accept explanations that say, well, it's just part of aging, or, that's just something that happens. I mean,
That's just in your DNA.
Oh, it just drives me up a wall. Or it's just all these explanations, basically, they make you feel better, but they obscure cause and effect, and they take away like my power to resolve the changes.
Totally.
Or the challenges that life,
They make you feel
throws.
Powerless.
Yeah, but comfortable.
Comfortable, right.
If
Yeah.
you just say, well, it's just part of, what happens.
Hey,
It's
that's
like,
what it is.
That's comfortable, but you take away your possibility of finding the root cause and hopefully the solution.
Completely.
Yeah. So anyway, that was my little rant.
I love it.
Yeah. So anyway, let's get back to this theory about heart disease from Dr. Seneff. So she's actually not an MD. She has a PhD in electrical engineering and computer science from MIT, which is a little weird, right?
Yeah.
But I've actually found that engineers can sometimes come up with like really outside of the box theories, like the way they think. They haven't been indoctrinated in like the MD school, which puts their thinking in really tight little boxes. They connect things that shouldn't be connected. So anyway, so since 2011, she has published something like 24 research papers in health and medical journals. So she's pretty smart, and well read on this subject matter. I'll post a link of her website with all of her articles and interviews if you want to do further research on her.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So the basic theory is that heart disease is caused by a deficiency in cholesterol sulfate. Now, cholesterol sulfate is different than just plain cholesterol. The sulfate means it's been sulfated, obviously, but it has different chemical properties than plain old cholesterol does. So why cholesterol sulfate? So unlike regular cholesterol sulfate is water soluble. So it travels very freely in the blood, and it doesn't have to be bound up inside an LDL particle to get around.
Okay.
Now, both cholesterol and sulfate, they both perform many different regulatory actions in the heart and its surrounding vessels, basically. So cholesterol is used in cell membranes. Sulfate is used to harness good blood flow and create conditions for nitric oxide production. Seneff, she gives a great explanation of what cholesterol and sulfate do in the heart. It involves structured water and really a lot of complex topics that you can read more of if you're interested.
Okay.
But
Show notes.
Show notes, yeah. But just, we're going off the assumption that if you want to know about cholesterol sulfate and why your heart needs it, you can go find that out.
Okay.
But the symptoms that surround heart disease are always under this theory that the body attempts to supply cholesterol and sulfate to the tissues. So I want to go through a few of those, like inflammation, heart attack, homocysteine. We haven't mentioned that. The cholesterol that gets in the arteries. And there's actually bacteria that gets inside the cholesterol that gets in the arteries.
Oh, boy.
So we're going to talk about that too. So first, let's cover the cholesterol that's found to accumulate in the arteries, which is the plaque. Everybody knows that one. And modern theory would say, you're eating too much cholesterol, or your liver is making too much, or whatever, and it's going into your arteries. The inflammation theory would say, you have damage to your arteries and the plaque is there to cover that up. This theory would say that the cholesterol is being stored in your arteries and is there waiting to be combined with sulfate when it is supplied by your tissues.
Okay.
So it kind of changes the role of plaque from like bad guy to good guy.
It's interesting.
It is. And your body, it's trying to store needed nutrients around where those nutrients will be needed. So if this is true, it's pretty damning for the statins and the lower your cholesterol
Sure
model,
is.
right? And there's actually a really interesting story that supports the heart needing the cholesterol it stores in the arteries. And it comes from South America where there's a parasite that causes a disease called Chagas disease. Now, the interesting part is that Chagas disease, the parasite produces a steroid that is remarkably similar to cholesterol sulfate. So are you following me?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. It's so similar that when the body creates antibodies to fight this steroid, they also end up fighting cholesterol sulfate.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, which is not good. Something like 86% of the people who have Chagas end up getting these antibodies. Now, these people, they have a massively increased risk of heart disease decades after they get over this Chagas disease. And the interesting thing is they don't get any cholesterol in their arteries. None gets put there. And so they have heart disease, but no plaque buildup.
Wow.
Yeah. So Seneff's theory would say part of why they are more at risk of heart disease is because they don't have the protective plaque in their arteries
Oh, my gosh.
as a cholesterol source.
So not enough cholesterol.
Exactly.
Because you hear the word cholesterol, and my mind just goes bad.
Yep.
Which is not the way that it should be.
Not according to this theory.
Right.
Yeah. So let's cover the bacteria. So there's bacteria found in the artery plaques, and there are theories out there that heart disease is in fact caused by an ongoing infection because this bacteria is found there. And so proponents of this theory, they point to this bacteria and they say, hey, this is what's causing the problems, the inflammation, the plaque, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But the bacteria usually found in that plaque produce a type of sulfate, which is
Wow.
really interesting. So in Seneff's theory, the bacteria is performing a service by creating the sulfate.
So it's almost too much of a good thing when you're having a heart, like it's a support mechanism that has, if you were to have a heart issue as a result of too much of this stuff or whatever, it's actually trying to repair you, but it's causing an issue. Is that what's going on? I'm
Correct.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of where we're getting to. It's like your heart is having issues, and so your body's putting things next to
Right.
it to try and help it.
Totally.
But that doesn't take away from your heart
Having issues. Okay.
Yeah. Which, according to this, would say a lack of cholesterol sulfate.
Right.
But anyway, about the bacteria, if you take antibiotics to try and kill this bacteria, it doesn't really do anything for heart disease. So the proponents of that theory just doesn't stand on very stable ground. It's like back to the statins or back to the inflammation theory.
Yeah.
It's maybe something that is happening, next to heart disease, but it's
Okay.
not causing anything. And so lastly, I want to look at inflammation and homocysteine. Homocysteine, if you haven't heard of it, it's a marker, and it's usually found to be elevated in people who are at risk of heart disease. You can actually bring homocysteine down by taking certain B vitamins. However, bringing that level down is not actually connected with less heart attack risk. So in Seneff's theory, an inflammatory environment, it allows for the cascade of chemical reactions that basically oxidize sulfur containing molecules like homocysteine. So inflammation and homocysteine kind of go together, meaning the reason you have elevated inflammation and homocysteine present in your blood is so that an oxidizing reaction can occur, which will supply sulfur to your heart.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, that's another thing where people are trying to bring down inflammation, but the mixed results. Obviously, if inflammation is there to make an environment where something can happen.
So what are we supposed to do?
We'll get there. And just one thing I want to mention, if you look at the heart attack itself, when you're having a heart attack, the heart muscle, it's one of the largest storages of an amino acid called taurine. And surprise, surprise, this is the only sulfonated amino acid. And basically huge amounts are stored in the heart, in the liver, and in the brain. And when a heart attack occurs, taurine is released from the heart in large amounts, and through a chemical reaction supplies the heart with some sulfate.
Oh, wow.
Which is pretty trippy.
Or just chug a Red Bull.
Yeah, there's taurine in there. Caffeine might...
During a heart attack, grab a Red Bull.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, that's a great idea, Brian. We do not condone any Red Bull use.
No. Stay away from Red Bull.
So anyway, to sum everything up, heart disease, it's a deficiency of cholesterol sulfate. Inflammation, homocysteine, and bacteria, they're found in the arteries, and they're there to facilitate chemical reactions that supply the heart with sulfate. The cholesterol found in the arteries is there to use as needed for the heart cells when sulfate is available.
Okay.
And I didn't mention it earlier, but high blood pressure facilitates getting more cholesterol sulfate to the heart. So high blood pressure could be another reaction that the body is trying to use to facilitate that.
That's so interesting. All of these things that we see as problematic are really just trying to...
Could be.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
could
maybe.
be.
And what this means is that a lot of the symptoms of heart disease are not... Maybe they're good guys. We don't know. They're all trying to provide nutrients.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So this would actually expertly predict the failure of therapies that attempt to treat those symptoms as bad things and get rid of them, right?
Yes.
Yes. And that's kind of like what we have. The therapies like statins, anti-inflammatories, antibiotics, they don't address the root cause, and so they have inconsistent success.
Oh, boy.
So that's the theory. So let's say you want to test this, right? What do? So this is the payoff. You ready?
I'm ready.
So first off, get more sunlight.
Okay.
No, really.
Really?
Yeah, really. When you get sunlight, your skin is able to stick sulfate and cholesterol together in a chemical reaction.
Okay.
And we do indeed see less heart disease in areas around the globe that have more sunlight. So you just got to plug sunlight in.
I can't believe how
there.
many times people are like, watch the sun, but then again, go out and get some. You need it for this.
Yeah. And that's not causal. That whole,
Yeah.
areas in the world get more, but it could be a factor. It
might be.
It might be. So the next thing to do is to get a high amount of sulfur in your diet, because sulfur is really the limiting factor in this. Your liver can produce a lot of cholesterol, as long as you're not taking something that inhibits cholesterol production, your liver can produce cholesterol. So sulfur is really the limiting factor. So you want to get a lot of sulfur in your diet, and you can do this by eating cruciferous vegetables, veggies, other high sulfur foods.
Matchsticks.
Garlic is high in sulfur, and it's obviously used for heart health quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Onions, eggs, all that. So that's good. But what about supplements, right? What can you supplement with? Well, there are certain high sulfur supplements like alpha lipoic acid and MSM, but there's one in particular that I think may beat all those out.
Okay.
And the guy who discovered this was Dr. Lester Morrison, and he was the chairman of the Department of Atherosclerosis Research at Loma Linda University, and he treated people with heart disease from the 40s to the 70s with a lot of different substances. He was trying all kinds of things out. This was before statins were around.
Okay.
And he found one of the most effective ones was chondroitin sulfate.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's the same one that people usually take for joint health.
Yeah.
Exactly that one. In one long-term study he did, which lasted 6 years, only 7% of the people receiving chondroitin sulfate died from cardiovascular disease compared to 23% in the control group.
Weird.
Yeah, so he used a dosage of 6 grams of chondroitin per day for 9 months to a year, and then 1,600 milligrams per day as a maintenance dose after that. So it's a pretty hefty dose.
That's a pretty big one.
Yeah, if you were to take chondroitin in a joint complex, you might get a gram at the most. So 6 grams is quite a bit. And I even read accounts of people going as high as 10 grams. So if you try this, you're going to probably want to get a powdered version of chondroitin, and you're going to want to get it by itself. So trying to get this much chondroitin out of a joint complex with like glucosamine and turmeric and other, you're just going to get way too much of all the other ingredients.
Right.
It's going to cost you an arm and a leg. So you're going to want to get probably chondroitin by itself. And as far as like side effects, I didn't see many reported. 1 or 2 people said that they took too much sulfur. They had problems with insomnia. So I actually tried out a big dose of chondroitin sulfate in the afternoon.
You did?
Yeah, I did. And I did find myself having a harder time sleeping. But if I took it in the morning, that didn't happen.
Okay.
So that's something to be aware of. And I was trying to look around for people who actually use this treatment, modern day. Mm-hmm. And I read there was one modern doctor who used chondroitin in her practice. Her name was Dr. Richards. So I'll link to her site if you want to read about it. And she said in the first 3 months, you would see like less plaque in the arteries And by 9 months to a year, most, if not all, the plaque would be gone.
What?
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. And in that time, many of her patients, they went from being exhausted and out of breath at the smallest little exertion, just going up a couple stairs, to being able to work out again, which is,
that's fantastic.
And like run, crazy stuff like that. Also, all the feeling of fullness and pressure in the chest comes with clogged arteries went away. She found... Also, this was interesting, actually. She found that combining the therapy with iodine seemed to accelerate the results. But she didn't actually have a dosage of iodine that she was using, so I wasn't able to find that. But
it's bizarre. I wonder how she added that to the mix.
I don't know. I have no idea.
Glad
but
she
that
did.
was something in there.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Anyway, that's the theory. And you can try chondroitin sulfate and see whether it works or not to test the theory.
And let us know. You can even
email us in.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I was doing this, I would also add in garlic. I'd probably add in taurine. I'd probably add in CoQ10 for good measure. And also Epsom salt baths are magnesium sulfate. So taking an Epsom salt bath would be a great way to get
advisable.
Some sulfate. And magnesium is really good for the heart too. So anyway, does all that make sense?
A lot of good stuff. Yeah, it does.
It follows logically? Was anything unclear?
No. I think you pretty much made sense of it all in a way that my feeble mind was able to understand.
You're funny.
But no,
cool,
that's
man.
a lot. That's great stuff, man.
It's a really interesting theory, and it's one proposed solution. There's other ones, like, we didn't really get into Linus Pauling and his vitamin C and lysine cure, but that's another one that I know has cleared out some arteries for people. So, I mean, there's other stuff out there, but I thought this was the most interesting because of how comprehensive it was, and I probably read about this for 5 hours.
Wow.
I mean, just the amount of complexity and attaching all these... I mean, complexity in a simple way. It wasn't like a stretch. Sometimes complexity can be like, well, this is connected to this, connect to this, connect to this. And you're like,
that's a bridge
I don't
too
know.
far.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bridge too far. But this was actually really simple, but the mechanics of it, the amount of evidence that she brought to explaining, how the different chemical reactions work. I mean, that was really, really interesting. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, you can definitely go check her out.
Yeah, especially if you're dealing with, or you have loved ones that are dealing with heart issues too. It's definitely something to consider when you're getting all this other information thrown at you.
Yeah, the one thing I didn't really find is, like, say you have stents already, say you have clogged arteries, like, what do you do if your body gets rid of all the plaque in your arteries? Like, what happens to the stent?
Yeah, what does the stent do?
Does it just, like, unbind from where it's stuck and
it just
float through your bloodstream, where it
forever
wants? I don't know.
Until it plugs something up?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I have no idea.
I don't even know the stent removal procedure.
They just put a big magnet on your chest.
Just move it down.
They give you an MRI
to your
and you
urethra. Oh, yeah. Great. Something else to think about. I'm not getting a stent, so.
Good.
Plenty of options out there.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, buddy.
Yeah, no problem, man. This is fun to find this stuff out. So thanks very much, everybody, for listening. I have a favor to ask. If you find this information helps you, share it with somebody. Or if you know somebody who could use this information, share it.
Pass it on.
We need help getting the podcast out there and promoting it. So that's the favor I ask.
Show it to a friend. It doesn't have to be a friend. Show it to an enemy.
That's right. Maybe they'll become a friend. All right.
The power of podcast.
The power of podcast. Anything more?
No, that's great, brother.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Be well.